A year ago this weekend, we all had an eye on a rapidly spreading virus called COVID-19.
Businesses will now be closed on Sunday.
If there is no more protest, how can there be a Protestant church? Maybe now we're all Catholics again.
Surely God is mad at America.
We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center.
I can't believe it's been 20 years. 20 years since I last partied. 20 years since I realized that I was lost. 20 years since 9/11. On September 11, 2001, I had an interview in Midtown Manhattan. I can't remember the company's name, but I remember pretty much everything else about that day. Today, I want to tell the story of God's mercy to me over the past 20 years, and I hope that you will have time to really focus and hear the story. And who knows, maybe you'll get a glimpse of His mercy to you as well. But before I begin, I want to set the stage and set the scene with Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 through 3, which says, "After these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, 'Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of God on their foreheads.'" This text paints a picture of an entire planet of people going about their lives, buying things, working, being entertained, fighting at home, fighting at church, all while oblivious to the fact that the world is falling apart around them. That word oblivious describes me in 2001. As I said, on September 11th, I had an interview in Midtown Manhattan. I had recently graduated from Pace University, which was roughly a mile or so away from the World Trade Center. I used to pass those buildings 3 or 4 times a week as I walked to and from the subway to get to class. The week before September 11th, I was at a club dancing and having a great time. And then I followed that up by once again going to the Caribbean Day Parade in Brooklyn, New York, which, if you don't know, is not a good place for a so-called Christian. 20 years ago, there I was, dancing in the streets like everyone else, completely oblivious to what was about to happen in a few days. And then it happened. The first plane hit the tower at around 8:46 a.m. on September 11th, 2001. I was at my home in Laurelton, Queens, New York, getting dressed for my interview, when it started showing up on the news. Along with many of you, I saw the first tower with smoke coming out of it. I distinctly remember the newscasters saying that it was probably just a small plane like the one that crashed into the Empire State Building in 1945. Most people don't know that story, but 14 people died in that incident. There was no doubt in my mind that people had lost their lives, and I remember feeling sorry about that. But in that moment, I could not even fathom that everything was about to change. So, I finished getting ready for my interview, jumped in my mother's 1987 Nissan Stanza, and drove to Archer Avenue in Jamaica, Queens. I parked the car close to the train station, and then I jumped on the E-train for what I thought would be a short 30-minute ride to Midtown Manhattan. But little did I know that I would be stuck in that subway tunnel for over 2 hours, and that when I emerged from that tunnel, the world would be completely different. After about 20 minutes on the train came to a halt. But this wasn't the normal congestion. We waited and waited and waited for over an hour. There were no smartphones, no cell signals in the subway in 2001. No one had any idea what was going on, and we all just waited and waited. Eventually, a subway conductor came in and let us know that there was a problem. Basically, they had linked all the trains together in the tunnel to make a long path to Lexington Avenue, and we had to walk through all these train cars. I felt like I was walking forever until finally I got to the stop where I was supposed to go for my interview. How was I going to explain why I was so late? This is what I was thinking. Remember, I had no idea that the world had changed while I was down there in that subway tunnel. But when I got out of the tunnel and started walking, I saw thousands of people leaving Manhattan by walking across Queensboro Bridge. that had absolutely no cars on it. I still had no idea what was going on, but now I was getting worried. Remember, no iPhone or Android in 2001, so no news updates. I got to the location for my interview, and I saw ambulances and people running around. I bumped into the gentleman that was supposed to interview me as he was putting things in an ambulance, and I asked him what was going on. And I will never forget his answer. He simply said, "They're gone." And I said, "What's gone?" And then he told me to go inside and look at the television, and I saw it for myself. The words and the picture will forever be etched in my mind. America under attack. And then I sat and watched what happened in the 2 hours that I was in that subway tunnel, and my heart sank. It all came flooding back to me. All of the things my mother had taught me, all of the things that she had said and read from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy about the second coming of Jesus. In that moment, I was sure this was it. Jesus was coming. It was going to happen any moment or any day now, and a sick feeling took over my body because I knew I was lost. You see, I was standing there, a fourth-generation Adventist, and I was just as lost as everyone else. I spent the entire day in Midtown waiting for the subway service to start again, feeling alone and afraid, not knowing what was going to happen. I saw the fear in everyone else's eyes. I even saw a woman faint in front of me as we were waiting in line to donate blood. Basically, a fighter jet on patrol flew over our heads, and she probably thought it was another plane coming to hit another building. Her heart was failing her for fear, and she just passed out right there on the street. That week, there was a revival in this country and around the world. Churches were packed. Everyone was seeking God. The words of the prophet Isaiah were fulfilled. With my soul, I have desired you in the night. Yes, by my spirit within me, I will seek you early. For when your judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. People were learning righteousness and humility that day, but unfortunately, clearly, it hasn't lasted. When I finally got home, for the first time in my Adventist life, I had a Bible study with my friends. We were all shaken to the core. We did the study over the phone, praying and seeking God together for the first time. And a few days later, I reached out to the bookshelf in my house and pulled out a book that I had never even took notice of, but a book that I have never forgotten, Last Day Events. And it was in that book that I read this quote for the first time. On one occasion when in New York City, I was in the night season called upon to behold buildings rising story after story toward heaven. These buildings were warranted to be fireproof, and they were erected to glorify the owners and builders. Higher and still higher these buildings rose, and in them the most costly material was used. The scene that next passed before me was an alarm of fire. Men looked at the lofty and supposedly fireproof buildings and said, "They are perfectly safe." But these buildings were consumed as if made of pitch. The fire engines could do nothing to stay the destruction. The firemen were unable to operate the engines. Some people say that this was not talking about 9/11. Some people say it was. But for me, when I read this, that was all I needed. God was pulling me out of the fire, and I started my journey with God that day. My life was certainly not transformed in a moment, not by any stretch of the imagination, but that day I turned and started heading in the other direction. So, what about you? What about the past 20 years? Has God gotten your attention? God allows things to happen to wake us up. He allows things to show us how close we are to His coming. And I want to take a trip through the past 20 years to see how He has tried to get our attention and to show how He has held the winds for so long. September 11, 2001, 2 planes crashed into the Twin Towers along with other attacks at the Pentagon, killing almost 3,000 people. The world changed that day, and it has never been the same. 2003, a strange virus named SARS started spreading in various countries around the world. There are fears that the virus could become a pandemic, and in some countries, healthcare professionals were quarantined, but thank God, it did not reach worldwide pandemic levels, and the winds were held. December 26, 2004, the first day I realized what it meant in Luke chapter 21 for the sea and waves to roar. An earthquake hits the Indonesian Ocean, causing a tsunami that killed almost 228,000 people. It was during this disaster that a bishop from the Free Presbyterian Church of Scotland said that the tsunami hit on a Sunday because that was the Lord's Day, and Sunday was not being kept holy. Late August of 2005, Hurricane Katrina hits New Orleans, killing almost 2,000 people and flooding an entire city, fulfilling part of the words from Last Day Events, which says that whole cities would be swept away. It was in the aftermath of this event that Mayor Ray Nagin of New Orleans said this:
Surely God is mad at America. He's sending hurricane after hurricane after hurricane, and it's destroying and putting stress on this country.
Basically, he was saying that God was sending storms because he was mad at America. And at the time, it reminded me of this statement from the Great Controversy, which says, "It will be declared that men are offending God by the violation of the Sunday Sabbath, that this sin has brought calamities which will not cease until Sunday observance shall be strictly enforced." But yet, the winds were held. Fast forward to 2009, when we saw the emergence of swine flu, another pestilence or pandemic that emerged, pushing the envelope a bit further since SARS came on the scene in 2003. There was initially a lot of panic and fear. However, that one sort of fizzled out and never reached worldwide pandemic status because the winds were being held. Fast forward to 2010, a massive earthquake hits Haiti, killing over 200,000 people, and is still recognized as one of the most devastating earthquakes in history. This century has indeed seen the fulfillment of earthquakes in diverse places, with a continued steady rise of earthquakes seen all over the world. But somehow, most of us don't really take notice. All of these natural disasters have added fuel to the fire of people calling for various laws to combat climate change by instituting a day of rest. Remember, eventually, it will be declared that men are offending God by the violation of the Sunday Sabbath, that this sin has brought calamities which will not cease until Sunday observance shall be strictly enforced. And now, the biggest fast forward. And finally, we arrive at 2019 with the emergence of COVID-19 that has completely changed the entire world. And in this moment of time, we've seen pretty much a synchronized worldwide lockdown, more calls for a day of rest.
We're facing a long and tough battle against the virus. That's why we're announcing today that businesses will now be closed on Sundays. It will be an opportunity for our workers to get some rest.
And a complete indifference on the part of so many in society to coerce people into doing something that may be against their conscience by denying access to businesses and perhaps terminating employment if they don't fall in line. Now, I want to be very clear. What we've seen with the mandated vaccinations is not the mark of the beast. And someone taking a vaccination does not necessarily mean that they are failing a spiritual test. But it is clear that the spirit of coercion is alive and well. And that coercion is completely outside of the character of God. And it will be the same spirit that drives the fulfillment of Revelation 13 when Protestants in this country legislate Sunday sacredness. And speaking of Revelation 13, in the past 20 years, we have seen over and over again the seeds for the fulfillment of this chapter related to Protestants in this country forming the image to the beast by blindly seeking to grasp for power over the state, which will eventually lead to forced worship. Already, the majority of churches have abandoned their Protestant foundation by linking themselves wholeheartedly to the papacy by declaring that the Protestant Reformation is over.
So the protest has been over for 15 years. And I get a bit cheeky here because I challenge my Protestant pastor friends. If there is no more protest, how can there be a Protestant church? Maybe now we're all Catholics again.
In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul states that the coming of our Lord would be like a thief in the night, which means that people would be clueless about what's going to take place. And I always used to wonder how that was even possible, with the detailed list of signs laid out in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, Revelation 13, and so many other places in the Bible. But now, I understand. You see, it's natural for humans to adjust to the world around them and think that what we are seeing is normal, but it's not normal. It's not supposed to be normal for hundreds of thousands of people to die in a moment. It's not supposed to be normal for there to be calls for Sunday rest. It's not supposed to be normal to see people willing to not allow other people to buy or sell based on whether or not they're willing to do something against their conscience. It's not normal to see Protestants abandoning Protestantism and grasping to form a union with the papacy, but somehow we get used to it, and many of us are able to remain asleep during the most not normal 20 years in the history of humanity. I want to share a statement with you that encapsulates how Jesus and the Father are relating to us right now, and I really want you to feel it deep in your soul. It says, "I saw 4 angels who had a work to do on the earth, and were on their way to accomplish it. Jesus was clothed with priestly garments. He gazed in pity on the remnant, then raised his hands upward, and with a voice of deep pity cried, 'My blood, Father, my blood, my blood, my blood.' Then I saw an exceeding bright light come from God, who sat upon the great white throne, and was shed all about Jesus. Then I saw an angel with a commission from Jesus, swiftly flying to the 4 angels who had a work to do on the earth, and waving something up and down in his hand, and crying with a loud voice, 'Hold, hold, hold, hold,' until the servants of God are sealed in their foreheads." This is a picture describing what we see in Revelation 7, regarding the 4 angels commissioned to hold the winds of war, earthquakes, pandemics, coercion, the union of church and state, and whatever else you want to put in there, showing the love of God as he patiently waits. Look at the care. Look at the patience. Look at the love that is displayed by God towards a wayward child like myself, and perhaps a wayward child like you, for so many years, and dare I say, for the past 20 years, from 9/11 to COVID-19. I wonder how much longer he will command the angels to hold. I wonder if we really understand what it means to be sealed by God, to love God, and to embrace his character of love, kindness, and patience. 20 years of mercy, 20 years of patience, 20 years of love. And the question I want to ask today is, has this love drawn us closer to our God? Have we really appreciated it? If the answer is no, we don't have to fear. God is still holding the winds for you and I. All we need to do is accept that love and be transformed by it. I know that's what I have chosen to do. But what about you?